Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. Today, I am very, very excited to be joined by Chloe Caldwell. Chloe Caldwell is the author of 3 books, the essay collection I'll Tell You in Person, the critically acclaimed novella Women, and Legs Get Led Astray. Her memoir, The Red Zone, A Love Story, was just released less than 2 months ago on April 19th. And she also teaches creative writing online, offers mentorships, and hosts seasonal writing workshops and retreats. So thank you very much for joining us, Chloe.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So while you've written at least, four pieces of work, I unfortunately have only read 2 of them. So we're going to be focusing on I'll Tell You in Person and your most recent book, The Red Zone. So the first question I have to ask about The Red Zone, what was it like? I'm sure you get this question all the time, but to write a book about periods and specifically PMDD, specifically with that, how did you combat stigmas that we all have around this taboo subject of periods? And also with that, kind of what was your biggest obstacle navigating that?
Yeah, the topic wasn't a challenging really topic for me. It was something that was on my mind and that I was very interested in. So I was really excited about that because I hadn't seen a work of literature that focused on the menstrual cycle. Most of the books on the menstrual cycle are scientific books or nonfiction books, but not memoirs. So I was really excited when I had the idea to create a plot around a period. I just thought it was so challenging and so kind of funny and different and unique. So it's not like I chose to write about it. It chose me, which is how I feel with all of my books. It chose me because it was what was going on in my life. And when I'm obsessing over something and thinking about it all the time and talking about it all the time, that's when I know I have something to say or to figure out. And it's a topic I'm interested in. So that was really exciting. And it came pretty easily. And I had written an essay for Long Reads under the same name of The Red Zone. And from that essay, I realized I could keep going and that I had more to say.
And you have a whole fantastic book now.
Yeah, it was really fun to keep. And the thing is, periods are such a broad topic. So It's almost like hard to stop writing it because you can continually add. So that, to your other question about the challenges, that was a challenge because period studies are always changing. Research is always changing. Every day there's something new. So I wasn't sure, okay, where do I end this? What do I leave out when there's so much to say and so many controversies and different schools of thought about it? But eventually I had to just stick to my structure, which was from 2017 to 2020, and just have a zoomed in structure so that I didn't drive myself crazy of wanting to keep adding. Keep adding. The other challenge was that PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, a very severe version of PMS that 1 in 8 women have, or menstruating people have. It's an out-of-body experience, so it is incredibly hard to get it on the page. And at a certain point, I had to just sort of let go of that because I didn't know how to get something down on the page that is so much of the body. And I think it could have been interesting to write one of the chapters while in PMDD. But the thing is, when you're in PMDD, the last thing on your mind is writing. So that didn't work. Definitely there were times I was working on the book when I was a PMS, feeling things, but when you're actually in an episode, you're screaming at your partner or crying in your bed. You're not in the mindset of this would be really good for my book and I'm going to write a chapter. It's just realistically not how it works. So I had to let that go and try to describe PMDD different ways through other people, through myself, different angles. And hopefully that did the trick, but I still wonder if I actually got it down.
I mean, I personally do not struggle with it, but I think you really did a good, every woman has some form of PMS or struggle internally. And if you don't have your period, or if you don't have, a uterus, you still have, then you have this stigma against you of like, you're not a woman. And there's a whole other set of issues by not having your period. And then there's also menopause, which, I have not experienced yet, but I've heard is a whole other fun bag of tricks, so it doesn't really ever end. And, in the aging process as well, like the identification with your body is, that's also a more human concept as well, but that's a whole other thing, the elderly and body horror. Speaking of letting go and planning, how much for all of your works, how much do you plan and outline, and how much do you kind of just like discover as you're writing in the midst of it?
I don't plan or outline at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just have the idea and you run with it?
I just experiment. Yeah, I try different things. And then later on, as the book develops, then I'll have more of an idea of what I'm doing, or organizational ideas or themes. With this book, I didn't plan it out. I just kept writing and adding things and taking notes on my period, and just writing down anything that was on my mind about periods, anything I overheard, anything I read, anything I was thinking about, anything that was happening to me. And then from there, you're like, okay, what do I do? Right. And then I tried a lot of different structures. I tried so many structures. I tried to break it up into an idea of having it be one section be pre, one section menstrual, one section dysphoric, one section disorder. That didn't end up working. I tried to do it through different years, starting with like people's first periods of the 1920s and then going that way. And then I tried to do it. I think actually my first draft, how I was doing it, because it was easy and helped me get down a draft, was doing kind of diary entry. So I was dating the dates. And I was originally thinking of it as being like, this is a book in the life of one period, one person's period. So that was 2017. But then, you do one draft, your book isn't ready. So I'm like, kept adding. I'm like, okay, well, it's not 1 year anymore. It's keeping going. But it was in diary form for a while. And then it was really when I sold the book to my editor, where we started to really talk about what structures to use. And she encouraged me to do a more linear model. Like I was making it way too complicated for myself. And so we did a linear model, which was helpful, and something for some reason I didn't think about. Like sometimes when you're writing, it's like the most obvious thing.
Right. You're like, oh, that's too simple. Like it's not going to work. You make it more complicated for yourself. Yeah, that's
right. And
it's kind of life sometimes too.
Yes. The answer is right in front of you. It's very obvious. So that was obvious. And with her, we created sort of a loose structure, and it was super helpful just to have someone to bounce things off of. And we had a loose structure of sort of like, okay, it's going to be like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I think there might be 5 parts. I don't even remember, because we tried it so many different ways. Like it was 3 parts, then it was 4, then it was 2. So I think it's 5 parts now. And we kind of talked about, okay, well, what's part 1? Okay. Part 1 is reflecting on your period. Part 2 is questioning, starting to question. Part 3 is getting help and, going to this PMDD conference. And then part 4 is acceptance of the period. So we created a structure like that. That was really helpful and helped me understand what I was doing.
And that's almost like the cycle of grief as well. Like I studied psychology in college. And I always remember for some reason that DABDA, the 5 stages of grief is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And that's
actually, now that you say it, that is it. Like the beginning was denial of like, oh, it can't be my period affecting me. Like, yeah, exactly. That's what it was. That's funny. I didn't put that together until now.
It's like grief is something, it's more than just, we think of grief as like literally someone dying and mourning that, but it can also mourn, the loss of innocence in so many different ways.
Right.
So I find, grief very interesting and something that's, more, again, or just concepts that are, more than the sum of their parts, which is, why I enjoy your writing. So both of your books that I've read are very, very personal, especially this one. You not only talk about your PMDD and your period, but also how it affects your relationship with your now husband and your stepdaughter, and also, other people in your life. So how do you respect interpersonal relationship boundaries while also staying true to your own story?
Well, PMDD didn't actually affect my relationship with my stepdaughter. She wasn't actually part of any of that. That was all between my husband and I. She was never around for it. So with her, who I call Sadie in the book, I mean, everything I wrote about her is just pure love. So that's not really an issue. If you're writing about someone from love,
right, it's just all good and kindness.
You really need to worry about it. If you're writing books to, jab at people, but that's not why I write. Right. So all of my books, I like to think, are written with a lot of compassion, and I write about people that I love. As for my husband, I would have loved to have written this book without him being part of it, but it wasn't possible.
He's part of your life.
I tried. It was like, okay, this is about PMDD, because I thought, oh, maybe this book could be like a more scientific book, or it could be this, it could be that. But at the end of the day, and my editor, was like, this is a memoir. Then it's like, all right, well, if it's a memoir, it needs characters. Right. And so he became a bigger part of it in later drafts, like the book that you're reading now.
So he wasn't really even in your initial drafts or your initial storyline.
He was in it, but it was more me and periods, and not so much like us. And then I thought, no, this is his story too. A lot of it. So that was pretty easy as well. He is incredibly open-minded and just doesn't have that stuff that a lot of people have about being written about. He was really open to it. And he was really helpful because he would give me a different perspective, and he would remember things differently, and remind me of things and tell me things I had said. And he read, most of the drafts. And it was actually his idea to do the one chapter that is called The Cycle, because he had the note that the cycle wasn't really coming through of what would go on with us, of like the fight and then the repair.
You're taking like a larger scale point of view to look back at it.
Yeah. So he came up with that, which was great. So, for me, it's just, people think like, oh, you told everything like of my books, but it's like, no, I didn't. I kept it very much. If it related to PMDD and my period, it's in there. And then of course there's like other little things, but, I just kept it to that topic. So it's not like, tons of our other stuff is not in there. So that's, for me, that's really helpful when writing nonfiction. It's like, okay, well, does this anecdote about this person serve the story?
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of anecdotes, I'm sure, your most, maybe not the most popular, but perhaps the most fun one to read in a sense, the linen closet, with all the different perspectives of different women and their first experience with getting their period. I was instantly reminded of When Harry Met Sally. And when you see all the old couples, or, the couples who've been together for a long time and talking about their relationships. So how did you balance also the lightness of some of that? I feel like it was a really nice balance. Where did that idea come from? To some of the heavier topics that you talk about. And I think it also, again, like larger scale helped connect your story to someone, who's maybe not perhaps identifying as a woman, or who's going through a menstrual cycle, but gave them a different frame or perspective as well.
Yeah. So how did the linen closet?
Yeah. How did that come to be? And sort of, did you find that lightness intentional, or how did a different question, I guess, sort of, but bouncing off of that, how did you balance more of the lightness with some of the darkness and the heavier topics with PMDD?
Right. Sorry that it's like really sunny in here.
No, it's okay. It's kind of cool. Okay. It's like a rainbow effect. Okay. We can still see and hear you. So it's all good.
Okay, cool. I think for me, like, humor is just, it's in life, right? So I'm not a huge fan of books that take themselves incredibly seriously. even if it's a serious topic, there's always levity or,
I agree.
And not like always ha funny, but like maybe something bizarre. And, so that I just let myself naturally, if I thought something was funny or make a joke or something was ridiculous, that just is part of my voice. I think if the whole book, it was like fighting and how horrible periods are, then that's not going to be that fun of a book. But if I thought of the chapters as like each one being its own thing and maybe like totally changing. So some are more reflective, some are more narrative. So that was a way to sort of keep people engaged, and maybe take a break. So if one chapter was kind of dark, then maybe the next, and it's juxtaposed, and maybe the next one is a little more light. And with the linen closet, that came to be, it started with my family. So I was talking with my aunts and my cousins about periods. And originally the chapter was just them. And then from there, I'm like, God, this is amazing. Periods are such a universal thing and everyone has such a different story, but also there's like similarities in them thematically. And so then I just sent out mass emails to like friends, acquaintances, various people, and whoever responded. And it was so amazing to be able to see all these like back to back. And I tried to get everyone from like all different years. So it goes from like 1920 of my Nana's first period that I speculated all the way to, 2018. So it was cool to have a chapter to let other people speak. I'm really happy I did that chapter.
Yeah, it was a really nice. It also showed your curation and editorial skills as well. Because I'm sure, you had to pick, I'm sure you had lots of responses. So picking the ones that you were, and also not just focusing on a specific type of woman or a specific type of story. I think it highlighted, you're right, the similarities that we all have despite our differences. Shifting tones a little bit. Can you talk what it's like, to be a stepmom and what it's like to, not only be a stepmom, but to co-parent and have this wonderful, but I'm sure, complex and dynamic relationship with your stepdaughter, and what it's like to co-parent with, because her mom's still in her life too.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want me to close my blinds?
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind. I thought, it was cool. There we go. Even when you stepped away for a sec.
It's getting really intense.
It's kind of like, it's like an ayahuasca trip or something. Not that I've ever done that, but I think it would be fun one day.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's a lot better.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I'm so sorry about
that. Oh my God, do not worry. It's fine.
Being a step parent is incredibly fun. This perspective is not really out there in the world, but I don't know why, because especially for artists, like being a step parent is like actually the perfect thing, because you still have time for your art and you have a part-time child. So you actually get
it's the best of both worlds. Yeah.
You get both. And I'm like, everyone should try to be a stepmom. Like really, really cool. I don't see a lot of that in books, step parenting. So I wanted to kind of make sure that was part of the book. And that goes back to your, the lightness and the dark. It was kind of cool to have like other threads that weren't necessarily period related, but that were maybe about identity. So being a stepmom is great. My stepdaughter's birthday is today and she's 12. And I've been in her life half her life because I met her when she was 6. That's and crazy. We really connect over books and movies. So,
what are some of her favorites?
And co-parenting is good too. She has a stepdad on her other side. So she has, 4 parents who are all involved in her life. And what's funny is that they're all artists. So she doesn't any parent. She doesn't have one parent who like has a real job or gets up and goes to work.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
So she jokes that she's going to write a memoir one day about like
she's got a lot of inspiration and material to work with.
Yeah. And co-parenting is, it's good. I mean, for me, I'm built for it. I just, not everyone is, but my personality type, like that's like not an issue for me. It's almost like I've been a stepmom in training because I've always been nannying and babysitting, which I wrote about in other books. So it kind of really, for me, makes sense that I'm a stepmom, which is really interesting. The co-parenting thing, we did have one issue, and it was in I wrote about it for the New York Times. And it's called, We Didn't Want to Co-Parent a Puppy. So that's on the New York Times if anyone wants to read it. Yeah.
What ended up happening with that? Did you end up getting a puppy? Or?
We ended up getting the puppy, and it goes back and forth. And my husband and I were totally wrong. We thought it wasn't going to work out, and it's been amazing. So it just goes to show sometimes parenting, you just don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, you have no idea, and then you're thrown into it and you make it work. That's awesome. I'll have to check out that article. So you talk a little bit about your queer identity and your relationship to the queer community as well in this book, and then there's more essays that I've read about it in your previous book. Can you talk a little bit about not only your own relationship now to your queer identity, as someone who still identifies as queer, but presents as sort of a cis straight, in a straight heteronormative relationship. And then also, specifically the bisexual component of that. I myself am also bisexual. And anytime we get like positive representation, I'm like, yes, I love it. And also not even so much positive as like neutral. Also,
exactly.
Better than positive almost. I mean, there's like the L word, Generation Q, I think tried to have some bisexuals. It was fun, but it was bad. But yeah, so if you can talk a little bit about, your own relationship to that and how sort of, you feel as a foundational kind of voice in the bisexual literary community as well. Cause I don't think there's a ton of, again, positive or neutral work out there.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say. I would never think of it that way. I mean, I think it's just a core feeling of who I am. I think I've always been queer and bisexual, and it was like, when the word queer didn't exist, like the word bisexual, as we all know, was super taboo and still is. And there's a lot of biphobia. So I never felt comfortable owning that. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote my book, Women, which is through the bisexual gaze, although the book never labels the narrator. It's really just about confusion, and a first relationship with a woman and starting to question everything and questioning identity and questioning the past and, queer heartbreak and, the whole chaotic queer thing. That book really affected people. It came out in 2014 and I get messages about it almost every day. And, it turned into kind of this emblem of either when people broke up, they'd give it to someone, like someone would give it to them, or when they were trying to court someone would give it to them. So it was kind of a sleeper hit. Like when it first came out, it was whatever. And then it just has this longevity, and it was in the L word, Generation Q. They are actually reading it in a scene. So
I didn't even pick up on that now. That's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know which episode, but she says, this is my favorite lesbian love story. And she reads it. And for, it was on a small press. So for a small press book, and to have this kind of, just, I don't know, success, whatever around or just
it's on a major network though. It's a big show.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So, that I think in ways was a little weird for me because it is fiction, it's auto fiction, obviously, but I never felt the need to like come out to my like followers or my family.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like the book kind of did that for me, but I still wasn't like, there's people that are like, I'm bi, and they
you don't have like a little pin on your purse or something like that.
Yeah. Or like in your Instagram profile.
I don't do it. Like, who are you married to and your occupation's like, no.
It makes me feel
your location or like, where you live, the like Boston to LA to Vermont, or like all my, I'm like, no one needs to, if you know me, you know where I've been. If otherwise you don't need to know.
That's how I feel. So I just didn't do that. It's more of like a core thing I know about myself, but I didn't feel like I need to make it public, but it is public because I wrote this book. Right. So it's like it's like a unique situation. And then it became kind of this thing that was bigger than me. And then I was asked to do a lot of like LGBTQ stuff, which was interesting because I had never come out. And then I ended up, dating Tony. And while dating Tony, I was being asked to do, it was like, I forget what it was, like prominent lesbians or whatever, stuff like this.
Yeah. It's a weird situation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just weird when you write books. But that's my path. And, I had a good time in the red zone creating these connections that you wouldn't normally find. Like I looked at an older draft actually of the red zone the other day, and it said step parenting is the bisexuality of parenting. Because you're like this, not this, and it's very fluid. And so yeah, that was actually really fun.
Yeah, it's very non-binary in terms of like what is an actual parent.
Yes.
Like it defies that stereotype.
Yes, sure. And it's very like otherized, and people are like kind of confused by it.
Cinderella, evil stepmother is still like the big representation that we have, or like was it Step Monster-in-Law with Jane Fonda? I think is like a random.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh, you got that. I think J-Lo is in it. I can't remember, but it's definitely Jane Fonda is like the evil stepmother, and she's like getting married. It's like cheesy, but it's like early 2000s. You got to check it out. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's so cool. I'm always looking for step parenting.
Yeah. Cause I'm a little bit younger. So it was, one of those movies that I watched when I was like coming of age, and I was like, this is ridiculous, but I should go back and watch it. Cause it's probably like hilarious in the way that.
Oh, great recommendation.
20 years ago. Yes. Gotta check it
out. Yeah. We need more step parenting stuff. And so, it was kind of fun to like, that's what I liked doing, was finding connections between queerness and step parenting. Cause I had never seen that connection been made before.
And hopefully we'll see more of it, because I think that there is a really strong, you're right, there's a really strong connection, especially existing in that otherness.
And I think that that's part of why I'm so comfortable in the step parenting space in a weird way, because I'm queer. Like I'm like able to hold this kind of different sort of label.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, step parenting is like hell, or it's just like, it's so triggering for them. And for me, I'm like, no, this is my place. Like I can be like, on the outskirts, I can be the different thing.
Right. It's not like, the typical sort of where it's like this, I think we think of like the woman who couldn't have her own child. And so she desperately clings to this other child and is jealous of the biological mother and constantly worried that she's going to get back with the parent. You don't have any of that, which is awesome.
No. Yeah.
You got your own stuff, but everyone does.
Yeah.
And I think part of why I resonated so much with your writing is because you loved not only fold in pop culture, which I love, and I just love pop culture in general, but a lot of similar writers that I love too, like Melissa Phoebos. I've loved her for a long time. Melissa Broder is like my queen. I loved that you even shouted at us eating alone in my car. I'm like, I didn't even think anybody else listened to that podcast, but there's a few of us out there. So what can you talk about, like your relationship to the literary community and sort of, did it take time? How did you find a community, and who are some of your biggest inspirations, both, when you started writing and now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been at this a long time. I started writing when I was 23, and I started writing long before that, but I started like really getting into it around age 23, and I'm 36 now. So the literary community was a big part of that. Back then, like 2011, I would say Twitter was really fun at the time. And that's where all the writers would be. And we all supported each other, helped each other, made friends with each other. That was a total blast. And I made a lot of friends that way. It was just a really good time. 2012 was like such a good time in the literary world for me. And I look back on it very fondly. So yeah, just talking to other writers, going to events, going to readings all the time, talking with people, and then publishing in really small places, not for money, but just for fun. And
so there's that intimacy that you have, because, this one you published with, one of the big publishing houses, but before that you were with small, that makes sense. So I was with small presses,
but I also published online in indie journals. And one of those, The Rumpus, which is still around, was like the hot literary journal at the time. And I published a lot with them, and that helped me get a lot of exposure. Roxane Gay was writing there, Lydia Yuknovich, Cheryl Strayed, Isaac Fitzgerald, Sari Botten. We were all writing there. We all became friends. It was a real community.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So the Rumpus, it was wonderful. And yeah, just reading small press stuff, not just reading like the mainstream books, like really reading things off the beaten path and meeting people that way. I did also host a reading series that was in Hudson, where I live. And that was really fun. I would just ask writers, because the Amtrak where I live, the train comes right here from New York City. So I would ask writers, and Melissa Febos read there. She's one of my old teachers. And I would just write to people and say, hey, do you want to come to this reading series? And then they would all come. We would all
probably nice for them to get out of the city too.
Exactly. Like everybody was down, and so I met a lot of people that way and really got more into the community that way. I went to AWP in 2012. That was really fun. But really it's just from reading, social media, talking with other people, going to events, supporting other writers. No one's going to support you if you don't support them. Right. Just being like, if you love someone's book, write to them, tell them, like spread the word about it, go to their event. Just, it was all very organic for me. Yeah. I also I should also say I did a lot of DIY tours with a bunch of other writers. So I did those with Chelsea Martin, Elizabeth Ellen, Mira Gonzalez, and we would drive around in a van. We would do them like in the South, in the Midwest. We did LA, and we did 3 of them. And we organized the whole thing, and it was like such a blast. So it's like, you really have to not wait around for, no one's going to pluck you and say,
you have to be your own advocate.
Yeah. You just do it because you love it and you do it for fun. And then those things breed opportunities. So yeah, that's how
that's really cool. So you guys literally like drove around the country in a van touring like a mini like road trip tour. That's cool.
Yes.
That's probably a story or a mem. You guys should each your perspectives of that trip. You should combine.
Totally. We've talked about that. That's a really good idea. That'd be fun.
And so what do you love about reading as a writer? And do you approach, I can't words sometimes fail. Did your approach as a reader, did that change once you started becoming more heavily invested in the writing process?
I don't think so. I've always read for pleasure, escape.
It didn't have any of that, like how the sausage is made type of effect on you.
I mean, I think about that stuff because I teach writing, but of course I'm thinking about, the craft and the choices that the writer made, but it doesn't like fully distract me from the book. I am such a reader for pleasure that, I'll choose certain books. Oh, this book is to like learn about craft for my class, but this book is just solely for pleasure to turn my brain off. Or this book is for entertainment, or this book is so I can teach an essay from it. So I kind of know with each thing that I'm reading, but I make sure I read so much of my students' stuff that I have to make sure to read for pleasure.
Right. You can't get bogged down in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I seek out books that I think that I'm going to really enjoy because it's just so good for relaxation and mental health.
What have you read recently that's really resonated with you?
Let's see. I just finished a book. Oh, I read a novel called Other People's Clothes.
Yeah, that sounds.
You might have seen it around. It's been on a lot of lists. It's by someone named Kala Henkel. It is fantastic. It's I
don't think I've read it, but I'll add it to my list.
Oh my God. It's like this psychological thriller. It takes place in Berlin. It's like 2008. Female friendship. It is wonderful.
Okay, I'll check it out.
I couldn't put it down. Amazing. I also recently, it's not out yet, but in August it will be out, which isn't that far away. And it's Michelle T, her new memoir, and it's called Knocking Myself Up. A memoir of my infertility. And it is also really fun, really important. So I loved both of those books. I think I read Michelle T's book in a day.
I mean, I'll have to put both of those on my list. I always
do
love
it.
I have so many books. I'm drowning in books, but
I
the more
know.
the merrier.
I know.
How do you balance the sort of like indulgence of like wanting to weave pop culture and fun little personal anecdotes into your writing versus like, how much, actually moving the story forward and, killing your darlings, of course.
I don't know. It's kind of just intuitive. I sort of have a feel, and a rhythm. And maybe in the first drafts, there'll be more like references or pop culture-y jokes. And then on the second draft, I can say, oh, okay, I don't need that. I don't need that. And then other ones, I'll be like, that's funny. And it's kind of like makes sense thematically to the book. So yeah, it's sort of, it's instinctual, but I have no problem cutting stuff. I'm a big advocate of just cutting things.
Right. Because you just like put it all out there to start. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're not like super partial to it, especially because you teach. And so that's probably a foundation in your teaching too.
Maybe. Yeah. Yep.
Because I know that's, I remember even in high school and stuff, like it's hard to sort of figure out like what is, words just because they also teach, you have to have 5 pages or whatever. Right. So you like have words just to fill the pages and that's a whole other beast. Okay. This will be my final question for you. What advice would you, final question, but then there's also one quote that even though it's maybe like a weird quote to leave us on, it like really resonated with me. Okay. What advice would you give to your past self at each point in your like writing journey? So like, is there anything that you would tell yourself after you've published each book, like it'll be okay, or you should have done that, anything, not even a regret, but sort of just like is there anything, if you could go back in time and say anything to your past self?
After each book?
After each book, yeah.
So, you want me to go through each book?
Let's just do the last 2 because maybe otherwise it could be like a whole movie. But
I mean, I don't have any regrets out of any of my books. So I don't really know. I'll tell you in person. I didn't like these are stupid.
No, if it's stupid, that's fine.
Okay. I would have gotten a more interesting author photo. I think that photo is really boring. I'm happy with that book though. It's like quirky and I like the cover.
It was like under 200 pages. So it's like a really snappy length too.
Yeah. If I had it in front of me right here, I could flip through and probably come up with something else.
No, it's okay. If there's nothing that sticks out.
But that's what comes to mind.
That's a good thing. If that's your biggest regret is just the photo.
Or I would do no photo because no photos are kind of mysterious and interesting.
Yes.
So that's for that book. But I have such fond memories of that book. So that's kind of it. The Red Zone, a few things. I would do what I was saying before. I would have forced myself to write chapters in PMDD, like just fucking do it. Like just do it.
Even if it didn't end up as anything, at least you would.
Yeah, but it probably would have. And I think that would have been really cool. And
maybe that's the reprint. You'll add in another chapter.
Hey, good point. Maybe it's a foreword or something.
Yeah.
With a new foreword while she's in PMDD. Yeah, maybe or maybe I could do an essay. You're giving me ideas. Cool. You're creative. Yeah, I think I would have done that if it weren't one chapter, maybe even more. I think that would have been great. I would have pushed for having a blurb on the front. I'm not sure. We thought, just to leave it kind of mysterious and for the aesthetic, but I've never had a blurb on the front of any of my books. And I feel like this is my 4th book and it's time. And it would have been cool to have a blurb on the front. Silly, but when you have 4 books,
totally. Because people get their first book published with a blurb, and I'm like, this wasn't even that good. Like, how did you get that?
Yeah, and I mean, I have hundreds of blurbs. Like one of them, it was more an aesthetic thing of like how it fits and how it looks.
I get that.
I would have said no. Put a blurb on. Sometimes blurbs don't age well, so there's pros and cons.
Well, again, if there's a reprint, then you can just add to that.
Thank you. You're all about the reprint. I'm into this.
Because I feel like, especially with memoirs and more personal books, like you're invested in that person's story. And if there's something sort of major or something they feel like could add to it, because I feel like we're always growing as human beings. It's like, why not? I kind of enjoy, especially books that I've read, I read mostly contemporary stuff, but if it came out 20 years ago, but there's like a foreword or like something about the author that's more recent, like okay, it's cool.
I wish you were my editor.
Oh, cool. I mean,
I would do
one day.
Seriously, I would do a blurb on the front. I would do a PMDD chapter. There was something else about it. I don't know. I think I have had so many drafts of this book that I feel like by the end, I like kind of forgot like what's in it, what's not in it. And I think there's more stuff, honestly, I would have added. Yeah, there's even more stuff I would have added. I think that's it.
Yeah, no, those are some decent, we all have regrets.
It's funny, right? Because I want to add stuff, but then like a review said like it could have been 50 pages less. So it's like you can't.
Was it under 300 pages?
I think so.
Yeah, it wasn't like that long. I mean, I don't know. People maybe because your other books were shorter.
It's like 280 or something.
Yeah, so people are just dumb. So a quote, a lot of your quotes were very, inspirational in the sense that like, not like, hey, go live life, but like very resonated with me. And I think we have gone through a lot of similar emotions and experiences. My thighs rub together when I walk now. They never used to do that. It was one of the most morbid statements I've ever heard, and it still haunts me. I have a super visceral memory of like being like 12 or 13 and like the first experience of my thighs rubbing together. I was wearing this green terry cloth like Aeropostale skirt, and I ran to the shower and I like kept trying to rub, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, what's happening? And I called my mom and I was like, Mom, like what is going on? She's like, welcome to being like, this is sorry you had to go through this. Like, this is your first time that your thighs are rubbing together. So that was kind of, I struggled with body image my entire life. But I've always thought that that's sort, I like to write for fun and creatively, and who knows if it'll be a memoir or short stories, but that's like, I've always wanted to do something with that story because it really resonated with me. And when I saw that quote, I was like, it still haunts me to this day, just like not living life up until it was almost more traumatic than getting my period. As someone who struggles more with like body image issues and eating disorder stuff, like that was like scarier than my first period was like, whatever, but no one talks about your first like thigh chafe rubbing together.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That is like such a funny quote. Like you never know what people are going to pick up on, because that's just such a random thing. And it was my cousin who said that to me. And I think you should definitely write that. And it could be like a meditation on like, there's probably so much to say because people talk about the chafing now. Like,
well, I love the product Mega Babe. I love Katie Storino, not sponsored, but she's like also just a fantastic like business woman influencer, and her products like actually work. Like I have big boobs too, and I use like her bust stuff. Like I really like her stuff because I like to go braless, and it's just like some
me too.
Powder that you just like spray under there. And hey, so
this is really good to know. You're giving me tips.
Awesome. I love to recommend things. So good.
You should do that. You could do it for the New York Times has a column called Letter of Recommendation about different things.
I'll check that out.
Look it up. Google
You're giving me ideas now too. Thank you.
It's fantastic. Letter of Recommendation is fantastic.
Okay, cool. I'll have to check
you should definitely write about that. It's very relatable for people.
Yeah, it is just such a visceral thing too, because it's like even now, like the physical act, again, it's like sometimes worse than getting like your period, what to expect for the most part. Like it's always there. Thigh chafing, it's so random because like sometimes you won't experience it. You're like, how did that happen? And other times you're like, I was outside for 5 minutes. Like, how did I have this rash? Very mysterious. And there's a whole product line too. And I think, it's arguably more effective than a lot of the menstrual products that we have out there, like Summer's Eve and all that jazz. But that's a whole other conversation. Well, thank you so much, Chloe.
Thank you, Rachel.
We both have we've came out here with some really great ideas. And we'll link your books and your website and everything. I'll link that New York Times article below as well that you did. And until next time, everyone, stay reading.